When someone wakes up after falling unconscious, the standard question to ask them after "How many fingers am I holding up?" and "What year is it?" is, "Who is the current president?" This is because there are hundreds of representatives in Congress, and it is easy for Americans to neglect those offices of government, sometimes not even attempting to remember the names of even their state senators. It can be confusing and overwhelming to consider all the different parts that make up our government. It is much easier to simply remember one name and place all our hopes and dreams in their hands. This creates a rather idealized version of that position, wanting it to perfectly represent America and the needs of the American people. While many political scholars would probably tell you that this is not how the American government is designed to work, it is nevertheless how it is perceived. Unfortunately, as author Robert Bolaño once wrote, people see what they want to see, and what they want to see never has anything to do with the truth. Given this reality, how then is this leadership position portrayed in film and television?
In his essay in Hollywood's White House, Michael Krikonis explains that motion pictures tell us something about ourselves, who we are as a people, express our aspirations, and to reveal much about our national character. Review the movies produced in the United States during any era, and you will discover a cinematic canvas of the nation's history, on which is presented the attitudes and beliefs of the people toward its leaders and political institutions.
More than that, we can find our belief systems present in the portrayals of the president himself. In actuality, the President of the United States is not supposed to represent everyone. Congress is. Representing everyone with one person is an impossible task, and it is not what the executive office was designed to do. Yet, Hollywood insists on creating fictional presidents who try nonetheless. So, our first question should be, does it work? Well, let's dive in. Every time technology steps forward, the office of the president must keep up. A good example of this is how the past two presidents have utilized Twitter to great effect, not only during their presidential campaigns, but while in office as well. What's more, some politicians argue that the country requires a heavier business lens, which leads to a business-like cabinet. Many moving parts with specified roles for each person, who are all cogs in the machine that is the White House. NBC's The West Wing highlighted this ensemble attitude in which each member of staff was given great importance in their own roles, and not all of the decision-making power laid in the president's hands. That being said, The West Wing also portrays the president as a wise, smart man who has close personal relationships with his staff members. Those relationships are explored throughout the show and resemble a reality that goes against the strict business approach and is not dissimilar to the era of FDR, who, according to the records of how he ran the White House, favored small meetings of the minds and close bonds between staffers. Most films, however, cannot focus on the president as well as a great number of his White House aides. This leads writers to fold much of the decision-making into the president's role, and that is what Americans have come to expect out of the president. Voters often think of their vote going to the best leader and decision-maker, or idea man. So what are we left with? Americans want to see a president who is morally sound and can cast good judgment through his moral code. They also want a president who shows his humanity through his family and his staff. We can't forget that when it comes to films, the drama will eventually hit, and this can often mean action, which is not in the president's job description. Nevertheless, we expect a good president to be brave in the face of danger and ultimately be able to handle themselves when lives are on the line. We see this in White House Down when Jamie Foxx's President Sawyer finds himself trapped in the White House with no one but male stripper turned comedic action star Channing Tatum. Although Tatum does most of the heavy lifting against the terrorists, Fox gets his moments as well, showing a president that not only can handle himself in a life or death situation, but does so with humor.
your hands off my Jordans!
The personable president is a common trope to make the character relatable, and typically, they highlight a strong connection with their family and a close friendliness with their cabinet members. In the history of Hollywood and American films, the role of a fictional president of the United States has been cast no less than 158 times. Of these roles, starting in 1932, all but 13 have starred white men. Those 13 films represent the 13 times a black man has been cast as a fictional president. And as Jon Stewart remarked in his opening monologue for the 2008 Oscars,
Democrats do have an historic race going, Hillary Clinton versus Barack Obama. Normally, when you see a black man or a woman president, an asteroid is about to hit the Statue of Liberty. How will we know it's the future?
his point couldn't be clearer when we look at the 13 film slate. The first film, 1972's The Man, with James Earl Jones, is given the presidency as a senator in a strange and unlikely series of events, implying that he never would have been elected to get there. After that, The Fifth Element and Deep Impact begin the cycle of sci-fi and action films that take a large part of the filmography for black men as president. Interestingly, though perhaps unsurprisingly, half of the films involving a black man as president occurred after 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president. This would suggest a greater willingness to cast black actors as president, except there are two important caveats. 1. The sci-fi action genre continued to dominate. And 2. Most of the films, even after 2008, never reference the fact that the president is black in the script, which suggests a colorblind casting process, leaving out any historical significance of the office. This is certainly easier to get away with in disaster movies, as the stakes are much higher than racism, so writers are able to ignore it. This is all to say that the casting of the president in a fictional film has a lot to do with who the public believes to be worthy of the presidency, or who they will perceive to be believable in the role. Hence, The Man going to great lengths to justify James Earl Jones becoming the president and circumventing the democratic electoral process. That is not the only time that this technique has been used, however. In Olympus Has Fallen, Aaron Eckhart's character is no longer able to govern, as he has been kidnapped along with the vice president. The responsibility ends up falling upon the shoulders of the Speaker of the House, played by Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman, famous in part for playing God, is very much believable as the acting president, and holds the right amount of gravitas and public adoration that no one bats an eye. Whether or not the president is casted as a white man, there are two basic versions of him. On the one hand, the young, handsome action star politician, like Jamie Foxx and Aaron Eckhart, and on the other hand, the more paternal figures, like Morgan Freeman and Martin Sheen's President Bartlett from The West Wing, who leads his staff and his country through 7 seasons as a descendant of a founding father, a man of God, and one who judges with wisdom, reason, and wit. In Olympus Has Fallen, while President Asher is kidnapped in his own bunker, he bravely faces threats at gunpoint and allows his staff to give away secrets to avoid getting killed, and so the terrorists will go after him instead. Martin Sheen's President Bartlett continuously references his thorough knowledge of the Bible to grapple with not just his decisions as president, but with his conservative opponents when they misrepresent its teachings. Thomas E. Cronin famously described what Americans look for in a presidential candidate as expecting the president to be a visionary problem solver, a unifying force for the nation, a healer, and a sage. Thus, every 4 years, we search anew for a superstar blessed with the judgment of Washington, the brilliance of Jefferson, the genius of Lincoln, the political savvy of FDR, and the youthful grace of JFK. Warren Rochelle, in his piece on the literary presidency, describes the position of the president as one shrouded in mythos. The position of president comes with an assumption of access to all known information, making the president an almost all-knowing being who is forced to become wise and good, or else a traitor, a crooked politician, an enemy to the people. These are all explanations of a character, not one person but rather one set of characteristics that define who the president must be or must become in order to fit the role of the President of the United States. It is only with these characteristics fulfilled that the mythos of the president can continue. Film and television have become important ways in which this mythos is continued, passed along and reinforced by the rigid stereotyping of casting for the role, and by allowing a glimpse into the White House, only to find that the presidential characteristics are just as heroic on their own as they are presented to the public. Casting the President of the United States is a daunting task, because you are asking an actor to portray the leader of the free world on screen, which will also come with all the attached political baggage. But the advantage of creating your own president is that Cronin's observations of the presidential qualities to look for can finally be combined into one utterly unrealistic character, giving the public a look at what our country could look like should we finally find that mystical candidate. And yet, even then, because movies will be movies, disaster must strike. It is how that is faced by the character that shows us a president that we have never seen before in real life, and we likely never will. Nevertheless, this is what keeps the mythos alive, and it seems to me that it's working.